Good morning again, everybody. I reported recently about Lisa Raitt tweeting out Ross McKitrick's link on climate change. And the link talked about Dr. Pilkey Jr. being vilified for his research and being run out of his profession. And what he discovered basically was that the increased cost of storms was not related to climate change, but was instead related to increased wealth and increased density at shorelines and places that have severe weather, right? So if you had previously 100 people living in the path of Hurricane Andrew, let's say, for an example, and now you have 1,000 people in the path of Hurricane Andrew, well, that's going to exponentially increase the cost of that storm. And it's not the storm's fault, it's the increase in population density and the increasing wealth, right? Like every year, we live in an economy that continually grows, right? People and businesses and corporations and stock markets expect continued wealth growth. If that's not happening, then you're ousting Tim Cook and you're putting somebody at the head of Apple who's going to make sure that next quarter is growing or whatever, right? That's just how that works, that system works. So being surprised by that and blaming that on climate change seems silly, right? Oh, this storm is 25% more expensive now, except you don't take into the account the fact that the population of the region has increased by, more than that percent or whatever. So anyway, that's getting off on a little tangent. There's been an update to that, and Mr. McKitrick has written an update, and we're going to look at it, and we're going to look at the implications of it. So it's interesting. It's interesting to look. National Post is printing and reporting, quote, apocalyptic rhetoric about extreme weather keeps ramping up, but experts say there's no emergency. On June 7th, I published an op-ed on this page telling the story of Roger Pilkey Jr., a U.S. climate expert whose research on climate change and extreme weather didn't support many of the alarmist slogans on the subject, despite his findings being squarely in the mainstream of his academic specialty. For stating them publicly, Pilkey Jr. was vilified, bullied, and eventually harassed into quitting the field. Conservative MP Lisa Raitt tweeted a link to my article, as if to prove the point of my story. The climate mob quickly vilified, bullied, and harassed her into deleting her tweet. And I reported on this, so if you check my back catalog, you'll see this, the Lisa Raitt controversy. I thought it was kind of funny. Back to the article. I wrote Lisa an open letter, hoping she would notice the pattern. Legions of self-appointed fact checkers readily ignore even the most deranged exaggerations by politicians if they serve the cause of alarmism, but will pile on aggressively and relentlessly against any efforts to bring evidence into the discussion. But let us not be deterred. The evidence is in the relevant sections of the past Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change Assessment Report. That's the IPCC one, which I will now quote at length. Read these paragraphs and ask yourself if the word emergency applies. Ask yourself if it sounds anything like what you've been repeatedly told by our Environment Minister and the Prime Minister, who speak so often about these things. I'm going to go through these in just a minute. First, I'm going to show you what we're talking about, what he's talking about, what the Prime Minister says about this stuff. Hold on. Okay, here's the rhetoric Trudeau's spinning.
Fight that Canada has to lead, because Canadians are already seeing the costs. Farmers' crops are being destroyed by droughts. Every summer, wildfires threaten people's businesses, and homes are getting washed out by floods, something that families here in Quebec and across Eastern Canada faced just this past weekend.
So that's interesting to note, the use and utility of that rhetoric. Okay, back to Mr. McKitrick. On flooding. In summary, there continues to be a lack of evidence and thus low confidence regarding the sign of trend in the magnitude and or frequency of floods on a global scale. That's page 214. Here it is, 214. I'm going to show you, you can see in the link, but it's the IPCC, and it says fifth assessment report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, Cambridge University. Okay, so here we're going to scroll down here. It is. And there's the quote right there. In summary, there continues to be a lack of evidence and thus low confidence regarding the sign of trend in magnitude and or frequency of floods on a global scale. Interesting, because Trudeau just said that climate change is directly responsible for floods, but the IPCC report says it's not. That's weird. And here's another one to which they added in their report in 2012, right? Links there. On the subject, in the United States and Canada during the 20th century and in the early 21st century, there's no compelling evidence for climate change-driven changes in the magnitude or frequency of floods. Here it is. Again, this is the IPCC report, and you can check the link. This is the 2012 version. In the United States and Canada during the 20th century and in the even early 21st century, there is no compelling evidence for climate-driven changes in the magnitude or frequency of floods. Yeah, interesting. And back to Mr. McKitrick. Droughts. In summary, the current assessment concludes that there is not enough evidence at present to suggest more than low confidence in global scale observed trend in droughts or dryness since the middle of the 20th century, owing to lack of direct observations, geographical inconsistencies in the trends, and dependencies of inferred trends in the index choice. Here's this. Summary, current assessment concludes there is not enough of evidence, right? Low confidence, global scale of the trend in droughts or dryness. So I'm not going to go through it again, but that's interesting. It's interesting to note, isn't it? Back to the article, Mr. McKitrick. Extreme precipitation. It is likely that since 1951, there have been statistically significant increases in the number of heavy precipitation events in more regions than there have been statistically significant decreases. But there are strong regional and sub-regional variations in the trends. In particular, many regions present statistically non-significant or negative trends, and where seasonal changes have been assessed, there are also variations between seasons. Additionally, Environment Canada continues to maintain that, quote, the observed record has not yet shown evidence of consistent changes in short duration precipitation extreme across Canada. Here, and then there's a bit more about what the IPCC says, and I scroll down, and there's more. Read this presentation, link for the presentation here, by Roger Pilkey Jr. that started this whole episode. Hurricane intensity and landfalls, hurricane-related flooding, and tropical cyclones all fail to exhibit significant trends. Weather-related damages are growing because population and wealth are growing, but it hasn't been attributed to climate change. Right, and that's a reasonable, rational argument, really. Really it is. Okay, back to the article. If the IPCC does say that as temperatures have gone up in many places, maximum temperatures have gone up, though less than minimum temperatures. So there's that. But Environment Canada's recent report on Canada's changing climate, most of what they say about heat waves concerns model predictions of the future. Regarding observed trends, they conclude for North America and Central America, there's medium confidence that more regions have experienced increase in heat waves and warm spells than have experienced decrease. And that's about it. And, you know, I've got to show you, or tell you, if you've seen any of my climate change challenge videos or Canada Poly Challenge videos, I've looked at the weather trends and looking at 100 years of weather data from 1930, 1939, and other data sets, and there's no warming, there's no heat waves, it's very, very, very stable. It's very stable. But I digress. It's interesting what happens when somebody like Lisa Raitt tweets out something like, global warming isn't making storms more expensive, it's population density and wealth. And that is a controversial statement. Controversial enough to have Miss Raitt tweet out basically an apology saying, I believe in climate change and that humans are causing it and that we need to do something. And here's the tweet. She says, quote, well, I've learned my lesson in tweeting anything about climate change. I'm going to be transparent and let you know I'm deleting the earlier tweets. I'm not the one to fight on this because, like most, I believe that emissions cause climate change and we should reduce emissions. Haha. Sorry about that, everyone. I didn't mean to go against what everybody believes, despite the fact that it has nothing to do with emissions and nothing to do with anything within that realm. It has everything to do with wealth and cost of storms as the first argument. And the second argument, watching a learned scientist who was accomplished in his field talking about something that is scientifically not outrageous in his field and having him being run out of his profession seems to be something that needs to be discussed more and not like buried under the, oh, it's okay, I believe in climate change and we should reduce emissions. Yeah, sorry about that, everyone. Sorry about the miscommunication. Miscommunication being you guys didn't read the article and tried to vilify me and jump on the bandwagon, which worked. It worked. You folded. So that's weird. It's weird to know. Anyway, so that's the end of the video from the IPCC's own conclusions, right? Things are, I don't know, there's medium confidence that more regions have experienced increases in heat waves and warm spells than have experienced decreases. So that seems really ironclad. That seems really like a good idea to put all our eggs in the climate change basket. Let's totally change the way we live because, there's medium certainty that some heat waves have increased. It's just crazy. So thanks for watching, everybody. Check out thepeoplespartyofcanada.ca and have a wonderful day. I think I probably could have fit this into the first video. I don't know. Yeah, it would have been like 20 minutes. Thanks for watching, everybody.